Is that a question? No. Okay. Larry. Yeah.
When you spoke about Ken Wapnick passing on because he got it, we'll say, okay? Like,
Yeah.
you know, so he didn't need that. I have a question as to
This
when
is
one,
this is a theory I have. It's not.
good enough. Your theory's good enough. But what about when one of us gets it?
Oh, I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the disappearance of the universe, right? It only takes one.
Yeah. No. Well, go on.
You know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So it only takes one of us to get it for the world to disappear because the world's not real and there's only one mind.
Right.
Well, if Ken got it, why am I still here?
Well, you must see yourself as being separate from the one mind.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, all of us. That would be true for all of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
Right. But this is what happens actually when people have mystical experiences. The thing about mystical experiences is that they don't last. They're like these moments, these sort of brief moments where you get it, where you see it and it becomes clear. But you can't hold it. Actually, the Course says that in that same section. I'll refer to that real quick. I think I'm a little loud. No. No? I'm getting some feedback somewhere. Okay, thank you. Still that way. Where is it? Sometimes a teacher of God may have a brief experience of direct union with God, but in this world it's almost impossible to this endure. And I think probably this has probably happened to a lot of you. I mean, which is really primary reason you're sitting here in this room. I mean, the primary reason you're sitting here in this room is that you've had enough of this experience to know that there's definitely something more, and we really want to know more about what that something more is. And we realize that this book, unlike anything else that we've got out there, is telling us about it, and it's telling us about it in this really kind of very gentle way. It's also kind of pushing and prodding a little bit that we get on with getting there and changing our minds, and so we really do start seeing things differently and with consistency. But one of the things I think that happens when you see it is you see it's done. You see it's okay, that everything is okay, even like dying's okay, because actually dying is perfectly natural. It's just a part of the process of awakening, actually, right? And you also recognize at that point that all your other brothers and sisters are already there with you. That would be a part of what you see. I mean, you would see the wholeness at that particular point. So the rest of us continue to dream, dream along with me, and so we just dream along together. But it's such a strange thing, because once the awakening occurs, like you said, the universe does disappear. Because there's nothing, because you're not projecting it anymore. That's the main, you're not projecting it anymore. You're not seeing a problem out there in the world anymore. You're seeing it only as being whole. David?
The Course says this Course is very practical.
Yes.
And I'd like to explore that for a second.
Okay,
With you.
good.
And I think there's one or two things in here that seem to be aimed at
David,
You.
can
our
you speak
practical
David, can you
Right
speak
there.
closer to the
practical
microphone?
understanding of the Course.
Yeah, go. You have
Is
to
it
have it
on?
kind of like this.
It says here, no one can escape from illusions unless he looks at them, for not looking is the way they are protected.
Right.
And then later on it says, how else can one dispel illusions except by looking at them directly without protecting them?
Right.
And I've sort of tried to make that practical by recognizing that when I get angry or that when I'm being judgmental, I say to myself, well, there goes the ego. The ego's doing its thing.
Sure.
And that has become, sort of part of the way I interpret and work with the course.
Good. Yeah.
But then it says the next step is obviously to recognize that what has no effects does not exist. And I find that a little more difficult to deal with. To recognize that, I'm seeing that something's happening to me. The classic example is someone's cutting me off and I get a little angry and I say, well, there goes the ego. But it's hard for me to say, well, how do I translate the course telling me that does not exist into something I can
Well, it
understand?
doesn't. It may have existed within the illusion of space and time.
That's correct, it does.
Right, within that dimension. But what matters is whether I make that matter or not.
Okay.
So if I don't make it matter, if it doesn't matter to me, then it literally doesn't matter physically. It also does. Matter can be used in two ways there, right?
No, I can understand that, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good.
Make a point on it?
Okay, hon.
I think that one of the things I discovered in my own wandering through this process, the Course says it is a process. And one of the reasons that we have a workbook is because it teaches us literally how to take the step-by-step program of finding out what the process is. So your attitude changes. It's not just from reading. That doesn't do it. It's sort of like the frosting on the cake. But the real work is in really doing the workbook. And teaching, being taught and practicing how to apply them.
Yeah, that's the miracle. The miracle
Okay.
is that you really literally see it a different way. So, I mean, that you're literally no longer working from the ego framework. You don't see within the context of the ego framework at all. And that's really a beautiful, and that is a miracle, because that's where forgiveness is, and that's where love is. So that's when life kind of works. Amy?
Something that you said.
Wait, take the mic here. We're recording this.
Something that you said a few minutes.
Just aim it right towards your mouth.
Something that you said a few minutes ago triggered something in me,
Okay.
and that is this search for truth addictive?
Yeah, okay, a good question. All right. So the answer is yes, in the most positive sense of what that means. Okay, so it's a positive addiction. I mean, it should become a positive addiction. And the reason it should become a positive addiction is because it feels good. I mean, we get addicted to what feels good, right? I mean, alcohol feels good or drugs feel good or whatever. Well, it feels good to be naturally high. I mean, it feels good to have the mind aligned with the mind of God. It should, and therefore, we want to continue to go this way.
There's something making me a little uncomfortable.
With the word addictive,
Well, no, I mean, that was my choice of word.
right? You afraid God's
There's a
going to win?
great deal of gratification for the ego if you make it to be one with them.
Oh yes, well you got to watch the one of the Dr. David Hawkins says one of the worst things that you can have is a religionized ego, that's definitely a danger that you have to watch out for. So, but you just have to watch out for it. I mean, just become aware of the fact that could happen, and that you don't want to go there either.
Yeah.
Right. I used to know this guy back when I used to work as a Methodist minister. He always wore a clerical collar. He had always a brass cross hanging around the neck. He had the word clergy in big brass letters across the front of his car. I'm not criticizing this guy now. Yeah, a religionized ego is what we're talking about. There was like the pursuit of, it was so, we should really just be transparent as possible and not be making something out of, Thoreau once said, beware of any occupation that requires you wear special clothes.
It reminds me of something I heard somewhere, that spend your time with those who seek the truth, but run like hell from anyone who claims to have found it?
Oh yeah, no, that's why I was concerned about this thing on the book saying master teacher, because somebody might think that I said that, and that's just that doesn't matter. No, I'm learning that, right? There was another hand over here somewhere, wasn't there? No, I guess not. Okay, well then let's go back to where we were in going through this text. Let's look on page 7 at the top. This is still from the early part. The Holy Spirit cannot speak to an unwelcome host. This is a very important section, because he will not be heard. See, actually the Holy Spirit is speaking to us all the time. I mean, there's never a single lesson 49, which we did here once as a meditation. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. So if God's voice is speaking to us all, it's literally there all the time. But the question is whether we can hear it or not. The eternal guest remains, but his voice grows faint in alien company. Now, alien company would like be the company of the ego. Because if the ego is dominating my mind, an illustration that I've used in the past years ago, it's the difference between listening to WEGO, which we do most of the time, or whether we have our tuner set on WGOD. The WEGO's giving us a very staticky, doesn't come in very clear, bad news, a lot of bad news. A lot of bad news. No judgments there. It is remarkable when you look at the news, right? Because the news can only be about whatever it is that's tragic that's going on in the world, and why we're interested in doing that. But going back to this, he needs your protection only because your care is a sign that you want him. So when he needs your protection, I mean, the Holy Spirit needs your protection. So we're watching out that the ego not dominate the mind. Think like him ever so slightly. Isn't that a great line? You just think like him ever so slightly. I mean, the Course at one point talks about what it calls a little willingness. Just have a little willingness. I mean, just to go a little ways with this, just to demonstrate kindness, for example, in some case, demonstrate charity at some point, demonstrate generosity at some point, whatever it is, wherever we're kind of giving attention, not getting defensive is a way of listening ever so slightly, right? And the little spark, there's that phrase, a little spark again, becomes a blazing light that fills your mind so that he becomes your only guest. When you ask the ego to enter, he lessens his welcome, right? So, but what's really asking us here to do, notice how often we invite, who are we inviting in? And how often we invite the ego in. That's why it takes a lot of retraining of the mind to stop inviting this guest and start inviting another guest who's going to have a much better approach for us, right? Okay. Going on down. Would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? I love that phrase. Is it? What do you want to be? Do you want to be? It's literally like being hostage to the ego. What I mean by hostage to the ego is an addiction in that sense. It's an addiction that we have been playing with for so long, all of our lives, that's why this is difficult, because the retraining of the mind isn't easy. That's why we got 365 lessons. That's why there are 669 pages, all of which are just incredibly redundant. That's why these lectures I give are incredibly redundant. If you listen to the Ken Wapnick, they're incredibly redundant. I once said to Ken, how many ways can you say the same thing? he just smiled.
To that is that's how we got here. That very simple things being redundant, repeated over and over, fragmented over and over. So
Right,
it's
right.
how we got here, it's how we get out. It's like
Right.
it's the simplicity of just a few things that were fragmented so many times.
Right.
And now we're having to go backwards.
Literally undo it. That's why the whole course is about undoing. It's about undoing this whole this knot of a mess of ego stuff that we got caught in. And you just undo it one little piece at a time. Just like if you have a whole, well, probably the memory earphones are the biggest knots we have to deal with in this day and age, right? Because they're always getting knotted. And then you got to go through the whole, and the way that you get out of that is you get out of it by reversing the process by which the knot occurred. So we have to go backwards through the process. And the good news is when you get down to the end, there's nothing there. And the truth of the matter is there never was anything there. Some little kinky thing happened. And we got stuck around that little kinky thing. And made something out of it, and it just got worse. You stuck it in your pocket, and now it's really a mess. Okay. I want to finish reading this part. So I'm sorry. Would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? You will accept whom you invite, and free to determine who shall be your guest. You are free to determine. Now this is a very important, the Course keeps emphasizing this over and over again. You have free will. So seeing how you have free will, you have to have free will, because it's a characteristic of divinity. God has free will. You have free will. This is the paradox. The paradox is, it looks like you don't have free will, but you do have free will. The free will, when you do God's will, it's free. You're doing what the free will thing is. Being caught in the ego is the opposite of free will, because a very good example of that, which we all understand, is an addiction. I mean, like a physical addiction to something, like alcohol or something, right? Because then it seems as though you don't have a will. You've got no will, and there's no choice. Now, this is a very important point that the Course keeps making over and over again. You do have choice. You are always at choice. Every second you're at choice. And every second we're at choice as to whose voice am I going to listen to. Will I be host to God? If I'm host to God, that's going to feel pretty good. Nice host. Or hostage, and then the hostage thing is the addiction. But it's not just addiction, and don't take it like in a physical sense, but that's true. But it's an addiction to a way of thinking. So it's breaking the way of thinking that becomes really difficult. I came home last night, I won't say anything about who this was, it doesn't matter, but my wife was on the phone. She'd been on the phone for over an hour with someone, and she was relieved to get off because the someone was complaining. She had to listen to an hour of, oh, thank God you came home. I got an excuse to get off the phone, right? And that's never fun for anybody to listen to, but whoever this was really caught in a kind of a loop, kind of a negative loop that thinking process that you can't quite get out of. And if the more you entertain that insanity, the worse it gets. And that's the way it seems to appear in this particular case. It just gets, because then you keep finding justifications for your insanity. Right? Okay, let's go on a little further. Yet this is not real freedom. It still depends on how you see it. The Holy Spirit is there, although He cannot help you without your invitation. And that's very important. That's why the more important is, whenever you see yourself getting stuck or frustrated or about to get angry or whatever it is, literally stop and ask the Holy Spirit to help me see this differently. Help me see this a different way, because I know that there must be. Actually, just stopping is good. I told you about this thing with Jill Bolte Taylor. I don't know whether I did or not, but you know Jill Bolte Taylor. She wrote The Stroke of Insight. She's a neurologist who's had this mystical experience as a result of having a stroke. Well, she's completely recovered from that because it was treatable in her particular case. But she's a neurologist, so she's continuing to do research, and I guess it's at Harvard Medical. And she was on Oprah a couple of months ago, and she was telling Oprah about some research that they were doing on stopping the mind, actually, and why meditation was helpful. But she said that they found that if you have a little 2 or 3 year old who's throwing a temper tantrum, the best solution is to literally kneel down and hold them. Just hold it, and it only takes 90 seconds. 90 seconds is all it takes. Well, she said, if you can do the same thing with your own insane thinking. So you take a piece of your own insane thinking and you just hold it for 90 seconds. It'll calm down and go away, and it won't be there anymore. This is the retraining of the mind. We're retraining it to be another way, not just to think another way, but to be in another way, to be happy, because we're no longer insane. Shanti?
I want you to know that I have a dog, and I have utilized this technology or the technique. And it works, even with the dog. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have a good relationship with your pet,
Right.
whether it's a cat or a dog, don't try it with birds. Speaking of birds.
I don't know. Okay, thank you. Hi, Kim. There, you got a mic.
Something comes up relating to what you're saying, and something that I actually just heard from you in one of these videos from a former one of these classes.
Yeah.
And you were talking about positionality and the giving up of positions. And when you talk about embracing that child or embracing our negative reaction or whatever has arisen, that's obviously not peace. The idea of relaxing comes up for me as the way out. We have to relax and open. Openness is one of the characteristics of a teacher of God. And it's the relaxing and opening, the letting go of our position, of our insistence that we're right. I mean, that's what it always
Right.
is. This morning I read, the ego always attacked with anger fully justified, because from the position of within the dream, we're right usually about what we're upset about in form. It pretty much usually, unless we're really insane, is happening the way the ego perceives it. Sometimes not, but it's the being willing to be wrong because we're oblivious to the fact that we're projecting all of this mistakenly from the fundamental error that we're actually not ourself, which
Right.
is love. And then we see these images, which is our own belief that we've attacked our identity. And so the relaxing, the embracing, the relaxing and the opening so that another way of seeing can be given
Right.
is key.
It's absolutely key.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important that it's okay to be wrong. I mean, we don't have to be right. And it's okay to be wrong even when you're right. I mean, all good husbands know this.
All happy husbands.
All happy husbands. No, it just solves all kinds of problems. It literally doesn't matter, right? I think I told you that thing last time about how they have scientists have discovered they have antimatter and negative matter, was it? And now there's another kind of matter they found it doesn't matter. Well, there's dark matter, antimatter and doesn't matter. Right? Yes, Bill.
Or it said about the universe, it's either never mind or no matter.
Yes, okay. You want to say that into the mic?
I said, I've heard about the universe, it's either never mind or no matter.
Right. Okay. Let's go on with this a little bit. Okay. I'm picking up in the middle of that on 7. Yet this is not real freedom if it still depends on how you see it. The Holy Spirit is there, although He cannot help you without your invitation, and the ego is nothing whether you invite it in or not. That's so important to understand. It's nothing. It's literally no thing. It has zero reality. It is mythology. It is a total mythology. There's no ego in heaven. That would be impossible. How could you have separation inside of unity? You couldn't have separation inside of unity, because heaven, by definition, is unity. It's the one mind, right? And the ego is nothing whether you invite it in or not. Real freedom depends on welcoming reality. And of your guests, only the Holy Spirit is real. Know then who abides with you merely by recognizing what is there already, and do not be satisfied with imaginary comforters, for the comforter of God is in you. So imaginary comforters is things like it's okay to be angry, you're perfectly justified in your attacks, that sort of thing, which is not not really comforting at all. And let's go to page 8, from darkness to light. Oh, my child, if you knew what God wills for you, your joy would be complete. I've probably said this before, but I just emphasize the fact that the Course never, ever refers to us as anything except children. Whenever it's speaking to us, it always says, oh, my child. Okay, so what are children? Children are the ones who don't know yet, and the ones who are learning, and the ones who need to grow yet. So we're in the children phase. That's why there's another reason there's no master teachers, because we're all in the child phase of this process. Okay. And what He wills has happened, for it was always true. When the light comes and you have said, God's will is mine, you will see such beauty that you will know it's not of you. Out of your joy you will create beauty in His name, for your joy could no more be contained than His. It's more and more exciting. That's one of the basic characteristics of a mystical experience is bliss or joy. And the bliss and the joy really comes in the uniting which occurs, because you feel that uniting. Nothing is lost. That's why people say it's so silly to be afraid of dying, or it's the real silly part is to be afraid of the loss of the ego, because the loss of the ego is the loss of absolutely nothing. I said to a group this last week, does the butterfly, we got a butterfly on the cover of the book. I thought it was fun. That was a nice thing the publishers did without telling me about it. Does the butterfly remember the caterpillar? Well, no. I wouldn't think, why would the butterfly want to remember the caterpillar? And or as we progress, would we want to remember some miserable part of ourselves? It's really a good idea to just let all that stuff go. Once it's gone, whatever it is, it's gone. Excuse me. All right, so going ahead with this here a little bit more. I keep looking down and losing my place. The bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. I cannot tell you what this is like, for your heart is not ready. At the same time that that's true, again, I think we've all had a taste of this, a taste, right? Yet I can tell you and remind you often that what God wills for himself, he wills for you, and what he wills for you is your will. Is yours, rather. But that's saying the same thing. And then let's go to the next paragraph. The way is not hard, but it's very different. I mean, that's that's one of the reasons that this takes a lot of training. It's very different. This is a wholly new way of thinking. So saying it's a wholly new way of thinking, that's why it looks so difficult. This reversal in thinking process that has to occur. It's so different from the way we've been taught and the way we've been thinking for so long. Therefore, it's really a good idea for you not to be frustrated with friends who aren't getting it. Right? I mean, you just, it's going to take a lot of time. You know, we're all different places along the way in this process. But if I were to get upset with you, or you get upset with somebody else because they're not understanding the Course in Miracles like you are, then you're not understanding the Course in Miracles. All right? I want you to notice one other place where it says something about very similar to this. And this is actually where it's talking about what it's like to die, but to let go. Just a real quick passage here. This is talking about letting go for the big let go, right?
Where are you?
Where am I? I'm on 16, 1666. Okay. Across the bridge, it's so different. What does it say here? The way is not hard, but it's very different. Right? To continue this. For a time the body is still seen, but not exclusively as it's seen here. The little spark, notice how often the little spark keeps coming, sparking all over the place, right? Which holds the great rays within it is also visible. And this spark cannot be limited long to littleness. Right? That's just, it's such a totally different way of thinking and seeing. That's why it also to be retrained. This way is hard indeed and very lonely, the way of the ego, right? Fear and grief are your guests, and they go with you and abide with you on the way. But the dark journey is not the way of God's Son. Walk in the light and do not see the dark companions. Again, the dark companions are ideas about grief, fear, anger, attack, jealousy, that's a dark companion we entertain in the mind. For they are not fit companions for the Son of God, who was created of light and in light. The great light always surrounds you and shines out from you. How can you see the dark companions in a light such as this? So this is actually, it's actually helping, the more we progress in this, it changes the way, we don't even see the problems. You just don't see them. They're there, but you don't see them, right? Somebody's misbehaving, but it's not upsetting you. It's not disturbing you. The crazy behavior is just crazy behavior. It doesn't attract us. And there's nothing to get caught into about somebody else's insanity, right? We just keep loving them regardless of what is going on. If you see them, it's only because you are denying the light. But deny them instead, for the light is here and the way is clear. So denying the dark companions, right? Another way to talk about this, which we've done in the past, is seeing the face of Christ in all of our brothers and sisters. And when we see the face of Christ in all of our brothers and sisters, then we are also seeing the light. And again, to talk about Ken, Ken could see the face of Christ in everyone, and people recognized that, and that they felt as though. I've had more. Actually, it happened on the phone just this week. Somebody called and to renew a subscription to the magazine, and she said, "I only met Ken once, She said, I did have the opportunity to go out to Temecula and do a workshop with him, and she says, and I had a little bit of a session with him, and she says, and it was like looking into the eyes of Christ. I mean, just imagine, right? It really was like looking into the eyes of Christ. Like so many people felt that way.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Can I point out a tip here?
A tip.
That I find helpful.
Okay.
When we read, when it's helpful for me, and I hope for all of us, when we read passages that are so filled with teachings of light and darkness, that not only are we light, which is what we are in truth, God's light, but light is also a description of understanding, as darkness is a description of ignorance. So God is leading us out of darkness, which is our own ignorance, into His light, which we are light, into His understanding. So I find it very helpful that anytime we read the word light in the course, to think of two things: the truth of who we are, and God, Jesus' understanding, which He's teaching us, out of the ignorance which we have made. So those two things are helpful in our reading.
The Course also uses the word knowledge and heaven as being equivalents.
Right, right.
Right? So to be in heaven is to have knowledge. Knowledge is not like something, not about the world. This is another dimension of knowledge altogether. It's to know God. You literally know God. So it's not like there's some sort of question about this or some sort of do you or don't you. You do know. You do see clearly in that case. Okay, let's go on to page 9. We begin to talk a little bit about the reversal of thinking, which I've been doing a little bit anyhow, but we'll just sort of emphasize it. I start off with a quote from Alice in Wonderland. If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is because everything would be what it isn't. And contrarize that it is would be, and what it would be, it wouldn't. You see? I don't think I read that right. But then I don't think it matters. Let's read the quote from the Course, which is a little bit more understandable. Actually, the one from Alice in Wonderland is too, if you concentrate on it. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. Very important. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. Do not oppose this realization, for it is truly the beginning of the dawn of light. Remember that the denial of this simple fact takes many forms, and these you must learn to recognize and to oppose steadfastly without exception. There's nothing that you can be denied, right? This is a crucial step in the reawakening. Another way to talk about reawakening is the reversal in thinking. The beginning phase of this reversal are often quite painful. For as blame is drawn from without, there's a strong tendency to harbor it within. It's difficult at first to realize it's exactly the same thing, for there's no distinction between within and without. So once I begin to realize that, well, first of all, the problem's inside me. So I'm seeing a problem out there in the world. I stop seeing the problem in the world. I then begin to, and the way I do that, by the way, is I just forgive it. But forgive it, all that forgive it means, again, is just let it go. I just let it go. I just let it go. Forgive it, let it go. Now I realize it's coming from within me. Now there's going to be this tendency to blame me for whatever problems it is that's in the world, and then that makes me feel guilty. And again, the solution for this is forgiveness. Namely, that I'm not forgiving you, I'm not forgiving circumstances, I'm not forgiving something that's outside of me, I'm forgiving me for having made the wrong choice in the first place. This is actually harder to do than it is to withdraw the projection onto the world. To withdraw, I'm sure everybody in this room has said things to yourselves like, what the hell did you do that for? Or why did you say that? Or what were you thinking, you idiot? And that was very selfish of you. All right, we've all been there and visited that place. Stop it. But really, we just want to become very much aware of that too. And the cure is the same cure. And just recognize, first of all, God doesn't care. I mean, God literally doesn't give a damn about your machinations of your mind, what you're going, God's already forgiven you. God's already said it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong, come home. That's what the story of the prodigal son is. Not, you didn't do anything wrong, come home. Kim.
On that point, the attraction of guilt opposes the attraction of God. That's
Right.
a statement from the Course.
Yes.
And part of what you're saying, John, is seeing that it's the same mistake based on the same fundamental error, whether we're judging guilt outside of ourselves or we're imputing guilt to ourselves. It's still coming from the belief that there could be good and evil. Now, eating of that tree is the thing that seemed to shatter heaven, and that's what we need to stop doing completely. To believe that you or I can be guilty is the same fundamental arrogance or blasphemy or whatever it is that's saying I can overthrow the will of God, and what God created perfect I have the power to corrupt, or
Right.
or there is another power that can be stronger than God's will for holiness and beauty and perfection and love, which is the only true identity in being. So whether I'm seeing guilt outside myself or believing there's guilt in myself, it's the same error. And that's why it has to be completely forsaken and let go.
So do we all understand why it is that this course is a complete reversal in thinking? And why it is that a lot of the world doesn't get this? Because it is so different. To see in this other way, to turn the whole thing around, to literally stop all projection. It's a tremendous thing to stop all projection. Alex, you wanna, yeah, pass Alex the mic here, so we get you on record.
Thank you. John, when I think of what you just said, and when I think of we're asked to look at the illusions in our mind, and when I think of asked to look at, for example, anger, I get angry. And when I get angry, I really believe, one, that I'm right, but I really, really, really believe that it's going to work. I'm going to feel better, and in a sense, it is salvation. And when I think of other illusions, same thing. The illusion is that, and when I think of looking at an illusion, I have to look at, I think really, really it's going to work. It's better. It's in the best interest. It's whatever the words are, I'm right, and it's going to work. And one of the things that, little bit by little bit, I've learned that my anger really isn't going to work.
No.
Even if I'm right, it's just not going to work.
Right. One of the worst kinds of anger you can have is self-righteous indignation. I mean, this is when you're really right. Right? And you have every reason, because obviously this person has done something against you or against people that you love, or etc. So it's really good to help it. And you said you feel good. Truth is, we never feel good. That feel good lasts only for a few seconds, and then beyond the feel good is the guilt. You know, then comes the guilt. Then comes the oh, I'm sorry. You know, and if you're in the right position, you'll actually say I'm sorry, right? Because you lost it. Right? Wait a minute, Jack.
I'm having a problem.
Wait, take the mic here. You got it there.
I'm having a problem with this view of we're not guilty of anything. It seems to cross the line into ending responsibility.
Right. It doesn't, but go on.
It doesn't. Okay, could you please explain that to me then?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure, that's right. Actually, what the Course is about is the opposite of that, which it's about responsibility. It's about assuming responsibility. It's about assuming responsibility for absolutely everything that happens to us. And because then you can't project. And you can't say they did this and they did that and look how I got dumped on. And what we're taking responsibility for is our thoughts. We're taking responsibility for the way we see things. And we're also taking responsibility for our behavior. But keep in mind, there's no behavior that isn't first a thought. So the Course is always taking us back to the thought which produces the behavior. That's the real change. The real change is in the mind. Which I'm sure I've shared this before, but about every 6 months I have to share this. And many of you know this by heart, but it bears, because it's so hard to get. This is Responsibility per Side, page 448 rather, from the Course. And I think I read this the second or third session, but we're up to the 12th session, so how many remember it? This is the only thing you need to do for vision, happiness, release from pain, the complete escape from sin, all to be given you. All you got to do. Say only this, but mean it. That's the hard part, but mean it. You can't just say this, you got to mean this. With no reservation, for here the power of salvation lies, and this is what you say: I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goal I would achieve, and everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for, and I receive as I have asked. Right? So that's taking it back into the mind about really being responsible. So it doesn't make any difference what it is. That somehow or another we're at play in that. That responsibility, it's like the focus thing again. It's like you're doing the right thing in the world, and then you'll get the right kind of results.
Okay, I want to throw a story at you from a famous line in a movie.
Okay.
The Owl and the Pussycat, where the main character is a prostitute and she goes to a psychologist and she says she feels guilty about what she does. And the psychologist says, oh, don't feel guilty. That's an old-fashioned type of emotion. And she feels so good afterwards that as soon as she leaves his office, she calls up the bank and cancels payment on the check to him.
No guilt. Thanks. That's a good story. Let's just go. Let's look at the top of 10, and then we'll take a break. All right? If your brothers are part of you and you blame them for your deprivation, you are blaming yourself. You cannot blame yourself without blaming them. This is why blame must be undone, not seen elsewhere. Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself. For only the ego blames at all. It's very important. Self-blame is therefore ego identification. Think about that. And as much as an ego defense as blaming others. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack His Son. That's any son, and you're a son or daughter, if you prefer, of God. So if I attack any brother, I can't. I'm barring my way out into heaven, and that includes blaming myself. I'm barring my way into heaven. Heaven, in this case, means seeing clearly the truth of quote reality. Okay, let's take our second 10-minute break.